Welcome back to another episode of What Works, a series of conversations about life's biggest challenges and questions. Today, I have a guest that I'm really excited to be able to talk to. Welcome, Justine.
Hi, Johnny.
Hi. So we're going to talk about something that is really one of the biggest challenges in life, and that is the challenges in relationships. So for people who have never met you, Justine, your name is Justine van Lawick, and maybe you could say something to the listener if they haven't seen you before, so they get a sense of where your thoughts and experience are coming from.
Well, coming from life, coming from already as a child, being very curious about family relationships. I remember myself sitting on the ground and really trying, actually that was research, what's happening in my family and how do people relate and what do I feel and why do they do that? So I always think, I realize now that I'm a bit older, that it's actually my lifeline. It's not that I started to study when I was 18. I started to study when I became aware. And then the focus of my study always have been, what do people do together? And I have to put out my phone. I will see that. Okay, so let me close this first. That's also live.
Yes.
Okay. Ready. So when I started to study, I studied child development and clinical psychology. So that's also because children and adults belong together. And I actually went into working with relationships and families directly. So when I was 25, I already worked in adult psychiatry with families. And it was the time that people thought family therapy, that's it. So it was a very, very strong movement by then and a lot of enthusiasm. And I that's why I got a lot of opportunities to go to Italy, to the Milan group, to Mnuchin, went to Netherlands a lot of time. I worked with him. All the founders actually were at that time traveling around the world, and I was part of it. So I'm very grateful for that. And it was exactly what. So for me, being in the world and working in the world became one.
Wow.
And still is.
Still is.
Yeah.
And well, then we know where you're coming from a little bit. Maybe other stuff will show up, but I'm really eager to just dive into the real life that we're living and the challenges that we're facing. So I was thinking, if we're talking about life's biggest challenges, so it's something human that we want to live in relationships. We want to find healthy, safe relationship where we can grow old together and have lovely experience on this time we have on the planet. So let's go into the other side of it, when it doesn't work, when we have high conflicts, we have violence, we have divorces that are really upsetting and destructive. I know you have worked a lot about that. So would it be possible to if I'm listening to this and I'm maybe in a relationship that isn't working out, or I'm feeling, should I stay or should I go? So if you would describe from your experience, if it's possible, I know that it's always context. Every human's life is in a special context. But are there patterns where you can go through a relationship and see what is it that happens to us? How come love can turn into something that seems to be hate?
Well, I think that love and hate can go together. So it's not turning into.
No?
It's that sometimes love and violence go together. There's a very old article of Virginia Goldner of the Ackerman Institute by then. And that was in the title, Love and Violence. And that made me very curious. So, and then I understood, oh yeah, that's exactly what, because I worked with violence, because if you work in psychiatry, you have to work with violence because it's everywhere. It's everywhere that people really hurt each other and love each other, and it's not a dichotomy. It's not or. It's both and. And maybe because you're so close, how can you hurt me that much? I hate you. That's when I worked in adult psychiatry, I found that there were a lot of women by then in psychiatry, depressed women. And when I talked with them and we made groups of women, we found out that there was a lot of violence in their homes. They felt oppressed, and I thought, wow, this is not depression out of nothing. It's a depression related to feeling oppressed and having violence, and it made me upset. And then I thought, but what about the men? Because then at that time we worked a lot only with the women. And then we found out also in the groups in psychiatry that a lot of women who were were not hospitalized but living at home, they became stronger, and then the violence became worse. They told us, or they didn't turn up anymore. And then I thought, well, what about these men? And I started to reach out to the men and to say, what's happening for you? And not to meet them as the terrible perpetrator, but as a human being who is doing terrible things, and why. So this is this curiosity. Why should a man want to have a scared woman at his side? Why should a man want to oppress a woman? Is that a good way of life? Why? So I started to work with men and women. And I found out that, of course, I have to oppose to violence. I really want to have a non-violent life, also in my work. And when people work with me, I'm very open about that. If you work with me, we are trying to find other ways to deal with conflict, but not to hurt each other physically, emotionally, sexually so much. And so we will find other ways, because of course you have conflicts. Yeah.
So what would you say became different when you went from the woman's point of view to the man's point of view, and then you had both points of view? What changed for in your approach of meeting these people?
Well, it changed that it was much more difficult to think in victim and perpetrator, that it became nearly always very, very complex. Sometimes you can say this is a victim and this is a perpetrator, but these are exceptions. I met them also. Really a person that wants to oppress, that sees the other, mostly the woman, as I own her and she has to listen to me and have this position. I met them. And where the woman was just scared and afraid and trembling and trying to avoid every conflict because then she could be hurt again. I met them, but it's a small group. And also, if you follow science about that, research about that, you can see it's a very small group. So I'm upset when so many people still think that domestic violence is about that, is about men that want to oppress women. I think it's so simplistic. And when you really meet the families and the persons, most of the time, it's much more complex than that. And so it's, do you want to deal with complexity in life and in our work? That's a big question.
Yeah. So when if someone would meet you, say a couple that is living in a really stressful relationship, or whatever word you put on it, but there's sometimes violence showing up in different forms. What is it that you do? How if I'm living in a relationship and I'm thinking I'm the only one in the world who's having this, I don't even know if it's normal or not. Maybe everybody has this. Maybe I'm just imagining, and you're skeptical if it's even possible to get help. So what would you say to? And I understand what you say about complexity, but maybe it's hard
You can also make it simple, Johnny, and say, okay, when people come, of course, I just meet them first.
Yeah.
I want to hear from both of them. And I think it's very important that when they are the two of them, let's start there.
Yeah.
Couple. Can also be two women or two men.
Yeah.
That they feel that I really listen to both of them. So complexity means also that I'm always open to meet the situation as it is. I really start to, I hope to start in a very open way. I don't know what's happening in your, let's see what's happening. So I meet them both as a human being. They can ask me questions, so I start to give an atmosphere of collaboration from the beginning on. Let's see where we come. And then I can say, and you refer to that, maybe you think that you're an exception, that your conflicts are really terrible and walk out of hand sometimes, really. But there are many, many couples that have the same problem. And we can work on it. And I can tell you that you can come into a better place together if you want to stay together. And also when you don't want to stay together, you want to have a divorce. Also then it's important to see how you can do that without violence and without hurting your children. So do you want to work with me on a non-violent way of dealing with conflicts? That's actually the starting point. And then I'm also simple. I'm complex, but also simple, because in a way, I very often do the same. I ask them, let's start with an example. Can be yesterday evening, can be last week, where you think that was an ugly fight. That's what really hurts. And I'm still angry when I think about what you said, what you did. Let's start there. And then this example, this conflict is under the microscope. So like blood, a few drops under the microscope can give you a total image of the blood and what could be wrong and things like that. So I go extremely slow there.
Yeah.
I ask them step for step, what happened? What did you feel? What did you say? What did you do? Then I go to the other. When he did that, what did emerge in you? What did you feel? What did you do? And every example will give an image of the whole picture.
Mm. So I have a question that I actually knew beforehand that I wanted to ask you, and it seems to fit in here, because if I'm listening here from a point of view of being one of the partners in this, I'm starting to get a picture of what you do, and it seems to make sense. But if I shift into the therapist position, I know you already are doing something that is sometimes quite different, because if there is violence in the relationships, a lot of professionals said, you're not supposed to do that, Justine. You're not supposed to put them in the same room from the beginning. So what do you say to those people? What are you saying? Are you familiar with the concept of?
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. Also in Sweden, I had a lot of critics from colleagues that say, Justine, you cannot do that. You cannot. And then, well, when I start so open as I start, and when I get this ugly feeling, this is really a dangerous situation. Here, and it can be, I can say you, most of the time then it's a man oppressing a woman, where the woman is in a very dangerous, unsafe situation. And I think this is not something for couple therapy. Of course, I have this. It can also be with I'm now involved in a situation where parents are really terrorized by their adolescent son in a dangerous way. Yeah. Where I think I'm not going to do family therapy here. No, because this boy of 20 is taking so much power and is so oppressive also to me. I have to think about another entrance. I see he is also in pain and all these people, but this is not something for family therapy. So that's also a thing I can add. Systemic thinking does say nothing and doing about the amount of people in the room. So maybe it's quite often so that also part of a therapy is working with one person. So it could be, for instance, recently with a couple where there was quite a lot of violence, and then it turned out after some sessions together that this man had a really terrible experience with his own father, was very much traumatized. This father died all of a sudden. It never got in, and he really wanted help there because by then he trusted me. And part of the therapy was working with him on his own. And later on, the wife comes in again. So we have to keep ourselves free, not to say couple therapy is always couple therapy. Of course not. Of course not. So maybe sometimes it's a family session with the children that were there when the conflicts were there, and they still are hurt by that, have questions about that, and to reconnect the whole family, and that there's space for the children to ask their questions and to have the conversation or the dialogue. And then maybe the mother on her own, or mother with her mother. And so we have to be flexible in settings. And my focus is helping people from a violent way of living. So, and violence is very much related to wanting to control life, wanting to control my life and the relationship, and you have to change this and that because, and how can we help people to accept that control is an illusion, to accept the tragedy of life and to let go of the illusion of control. So that's quite a challenge.
Yeah. You said something there. I just want to slow it down a bit. To accept the tragedy of life. What does that mean?
That's Chaim Omer once said, it's the opposite of demonization. And for me, it's also the opposite of wanting to control life.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's very important, also in my own life.
Mm.
It's incredibly important to accept the tragedy of life and not to fight the tragedy of life.
Mm.
There's always tragedy.
There's always a tragedy.
Always that this partner that I thought would be always there for me, always talk with me, want to have sex with me, do all like we did in the first year. No, it's not there always. There are always times that you feel a lot of distance, that you feel, and that's part of the tragedy of life. And then you get, maybe you get children and you really want to have children. And then you find out it's not only nice, it's also quite a challenge. Sometimes they are terrible. Sometimes you think, go away. So it's a struggle, but so important to accept the tragedy of life. And it's really helpful in order to come in a non-violent life.
What would you say? That's kind of what works. Curiosity that shows up in me. So what is it that make that change the climate of the space you're working in, when you say, instead of demonizing accepting the tragedy of life, how do you understand that? It could sound just like nice words, but what does it mean for your in a room with people? What does that make? What kind of difference does that make to accept that your children don't listen to you, your partner doesn't comfort you? That sounds a bit depressing, Justine.
Oh no, for me it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of depression. So when you can accept that your partner is not always there for you, and sometimes does say the wrong things, or prefers to go with friends instead of you to a movie or things like that, and you can accept it, then you have the wonderful experience of meeting another person. So it's also, how can we meet the other in the other, instead of wanting to make the other more like me. So it's really accepting the otherness of the other. And in children, in my partner, in other people that I meet, in clients, in friends, everywhere.
I've listened to you talk about this before, and sometimes you talk about romantic illusions as something that changed over time. You have a picture when you start out, you're in love, really in love, and then something's changed, and this kind of romantic illusion falls away, and you're in there with little children, no sleep, and arguing with your partner.
So that's, I think, the romantic illusions, and that's really connected to all that we are talking about now. That I can remember as a teenager talking with my friends, what kind, I already knew that I want to have a man, and I wanted to have children. I knew that from a very young age. I really want such a thing. It must be wonderful. And then we had a lot of fantasy. Well, my man has to be this and that, and I want that he looks like blah, 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 blah. And we had a lot of fantasy, and that's related to romantic illusions, of course, because then you make a frame and you search for a person that fits the frame. And then maybe you think this fits the frame, but always the frame will not be the person. So then you have to meet the real person, and that can be very different from the illusion.
Yeah.
And people that keep on to romantic illusions think, oh, I wasn't aware of this, and I made a big mistake. he seemed like, but now it turns out he's much more selfish, he's not so caring. So I have to finish this relationship and I have to search for a better one. And there you have this serial monogamy that I have this partner, no, it doesn't fit the frame. I search for another one. And I've seen that with friends sometimes, that they have one after another and they never accept the tragedy of life, that the other person will never fit the frame. Yeah.
So what if we're talking about this really dark place you can find yourself in relationships, there seem to be that not only that you change partner and still believe in this kind of romantic framework that is too narrow, but some people seem also to keep finding themselves in abusive relationships. They end one relationship and something happens, they find themselves and they seem to, why do I always get these angry women or angry men in my life? Have you any experience or thoughts about that?
Yeah, but for me, every story is unique.
Yeah.
So I can say some general things about it, but I hate the thought, well, this woman is always having abusive relationship with a kind of thought, then she must also create that. And I hate this kind of thinking because I think, no, we cannot say that. We have to see every time again what's happening here. And it could be that she really tries to be the best possible woman she can and attuning all the time to his wishes and all the time. And when you do that, it can become very, very difficult because you cannot always delete yourself and try to make the other one happy. And if you do that, which is a beautiful thing to do, you can get stuck. And the other one can be in a position of getting the illusion that he can control you, or the other way around. Because I can say you that I worked quite a lot with couples, and people sometimes hate when I say that, where the man, the husband, the man is very afraid of his woman, of the wife. And that I say, well, if we look at the power difference here, you can also say that the woman is in power and the man feels afraid and weak and is in a way trembling for his wife, afraid to do things wrong again. And I've seen that quite a lot. Yeah. And I don't know why people want to stick to the image of the man oppressing the woman. It happens. We have to be open to all possibilities. So I have to be aware that it can be the case. But I've also seen the other way around, or I've also seen that they really are balanced in fighting each other and having a lot of hurt each other a lot. And then my attention always go to the children as well.
Yeah,
that's also very important. Yeah.
So when if we, I think I just want to ask some more question, then we can go into when the couple and the children comes into the picture, and we'll talk more kind of like a family. But I'm still curious about, because people, let's say we create stories about ourselves. So we can create a story that I'm the victim or I'm the perpetrator, or maybe that's the professionals that do that. I don't know sometimes who's giving those words into the minds
also in the community.
Yeah, media and everything. But anyhow, we create stories, so you can be really trapped in a story that you start to believe you were a perpetrator or a victim or a uncontrollable person or someone who has less value than others. It's kind of like these stories hypnotize ourselves and a family can create a story about themselves also, how we are misfits or we are better than others, or stories like that. But when you, I think something you have shown it to people when, I know when you lecture, more like a dance, and you talk about a vulnerability cycle. Is it possible to say something about that dance between not the perpetrator or the victim, just the dance between partners regarding vulnerability?
So the vulnerability cycle is about that. My story of life is also that when people start a relationship, they bring a package with them, a package from their life before the relationship that can be wonderful with good things and good experience, but actually always also with experience that hurt. And that makes you vulnerable. For instance, when a man as a son had the feeling that he is always doing wrong, there's always critics, he's always had the feeling as a child that he was never good enough for his father or mother, and that it really hurt, because you can hear stories about they could only love me when I really had a performance, a very well performance, and was well in school, and it was not about me. It was about my performance and things like that. So when this man meets his future wife in love, when you are in love, everything seems to be perfect. So this girl, young woman, gave him the feeling that he's always good as he is. It's about you. You are wonderful. You don't have to change. This is exactly what we can laugh together. We have such a good time. And he had the feeling, okay, now I get the real life that I missed with my parents, and this will be forever. That's the mistake that people make. And maybe she is from a background where she had wonderful parents. She is an only child, and the parents were quite old, like around 40 when she came, and she was so much wished for, and they were really at her and wanted to know everything, and really, what did you do in school? And she started, to close down, in order to say, I don't know, Mom, to close down a bit, because she felt so overwhelmed. And then she met this man, and he gave her such a lot of space, and such a lot of, no, of course, when you want to do that, that's okay. And I don't need to know everything of your experience. So then her vulnerability is he is caring for this. And then when we are in love the first year, it feels like he will always give me that space. I can be myself. I can be totally myself. I never had this feeling before. That's where the romantic illusions come in. But then she loves her autonomy so much that she is going away a lot with friends. She also wants to have the weekend with and he is feeling a bit left alone. And he is starting to say, okay, but with whom, and who was that guy? And and then she had the feeling, oh no, not again. And she started to be critical. And then he said, oh, is it not good what I do? This is the same old feeling. So very often these vulnerabilities and the survival strategy that I made come in the relationship. when I draw it, it's even more clear.
Yeah.
But it's important to understand that very often vulnerabilities are part of it. And that there are like blue spots, like wounds. Somebody presses on my old wounds, and then she is going to draw back, to build a wall. I'm not there for you. And maybe he, as a survival strategy, is starting to be critical, to have reproaches, to fight. And she is going backwards. And you can understand that that is triggering the vulnerabilities even more. And that's where they can escalate together. And it's important that we can draw that and that people understand it's related to vulnerabilities.
Vulnerabilities. So when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of my own life and people I met in therapy, that it seems to be a really easy step to go from this vulnerability that you feel when you start to feel unsafe and unsure, and to in action in the relationship, start to try to get yourself safe by controlling where you're going, when are you going to come home, who you're going to see, and the trouble with that, I know you probably think the same, that control will always end up in failure because you can't control life. So it's a reset. It's a kind of like you're on a path that will never end good if you start into this controlling. And maybe the other part will say, well, I will just be with my friends, there will no men around, it was just my friends. And then somebody shows up and a picture is taken and it's on Facebook, and the uncertainty and safety gets validated. I knew it. And you start to control more, and it goes on both ways, because maybe you don't want to stimulate that. You see that in the other partner, so, oh, he's worried that I'm going to see somebody else. So you just trying to settle his worry by saying, oh, there will be no one else, I will be home at that time. And you try to go into that kind of controlling to satisfy the other partner. And that is also the same dance that will eventually start to be destructive and hard. In my simple world, I'm not as experienced as you, Justine, but I usually think of it like the lack of trust fuels control.
And the other way around.
And the other way around. Well, the other way around would be, yeah, okay, so control destroys trust.
Yeah.
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 So maybe we can say together now that accepting the tragedy of life is letting go of control, is trust, basic trust. Yeah.
So let's put the kids into the couple and say they've stayed a while and they have some challenges, but they have really decided to be together, and they get a little child that has been really waiting for it to happen. And after a while, these conflicts might show up again, or for the first time, maybe when you have a little children, maybe the first 2 years is the really challenging years. So what do you think about, but maybe because you have explained so beautifully this kind of dance and what happens. So let's go to the really challenging part, when you've decided not to live together anymore. So we're it's been a while in the relationship and you have kids, but it's a destructive relationship, or the love has died, or whatever the experience is, but they decide to separate, and they divorced, but they still have children. So they have to find ways to collaborate. And this is a really, from the point of view of children, sometimes a tough life situation, where the conflict seems to become even harder to manage, and the children are kind of in the middle of it all. What I'm just checking my notes a little.
Johnny, we will go there. The no kids in the middle stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, but there is something I want to add.
Yeah.
Because it seems that we are talking until now a lot about couples from also our own cultural background. And I also worked quite a lot now with couples coming from Moroccan background, Arabic background, Hindustan, Suriname, Antillian. I learned a lot there. And I want to say something about it because I think we also have to take in this diversity and see, is it different? It's the same and different, both. Because a lot of people say, yeah, but in a lot of Arabic culture, it's still so that the woman has to listen and it can be, and we can talk about that. But I have to say now, after so many years of experience, I do different, but I also do the same. So I'm really curious, I'm open, I want to listen to them. And I can tell you from a Moroccan couple where he was violent against her and she was feeling very unhappy. And when they were referred to me, the referrer thought this was really terrorizing violence and a man thinking that the woman only has to listen to him and da. So I started to really know them. I did also a home visit to see, I like that, to see how do you live and where are the rooms and where are the children, and to sit there. And they started to trust me. I cannot tell the whole story, but the important part was that we started to talk about culture, and that this man said, yeah, you are a Dutch woman, and I know now that in Holland you really want to have this coupleship, that you're of the same, that you're balanced. And you want to do everything together, and the man has also to make meals and to clean, and we do not do that. And I said, okay, so how do you? I said, well, with us the man is here, and the woman used to be here, but now it's more like this. And I said, okay, what does it mean in your life, this, and what does it mean in bed, and what does it mean in the kitchen, and what does it mean in the car, and what does it mean everywhere? And then I asked the woman, and she said, yeah, I agree, the man has to be here and the woman has to be there. So I was aware, let's not colonialize and tell them that they have to do this like we do. So let's go from there. And then we went through the house, and then she said, yeah, but in the kitchen is that. Okay, in the kitchen you're the boss. They talked about that. In the car it's him. And then we went to the bed. And there they got in a kind of struggle, because they said in the Quran, it said that a woman has to give the man what he needs. And I said, bring the Quran and let me read it and tell me about it. And then in the Quran, it's actually a beautiful text. It was also said that the man has to attune to the wishes of the woman. So we talked a lot then about that, and talking about that, and also expanded that to the rest of their life was so incredibly helpful also for me. And of course we did the same thing as a conflict, and where does it really walk out of hand, and the violence stopped. They found other ways, but I also had to adapt to their idea that the man is here and the woman is there, and to accept it. Accept I cannot control them. I cannot bring them to my culture.
No.
So why not? Okay, if they live like that and they agree on that, it's okay. When they can do it without violence. So, yeah, I also as a therapist have to accept the tragedy that I cannot change all people to the way that I think you should do it that way or that way. And Peter Rober is writing beautifully about let's not colonize people.
Yeah.
And I think in this violence work, that's so important. That because I meet a lot of colleagues that actually go from a colonizing position and say you have to do it that, and a woman has to be equal to the man, and you have to do it that way, and that's chasing people away.
Yeah, and it's actually doing this to between the therapist and the families.
Exactly.
We're doing that, which is some kind of violence sometimes, isn't it?
I think it's violence.
Yeah.
For me, that's violence. It's not meeting the other as another. It's yeah.
So thank you for reminding me that we're also in a frame here talking about some kind of mutual understanding, but there's a lot of things we don't understand. So the openness is really inspiring to hear you talk about. Since you said that, I there's one thing that you said that kind of fits into this that I just want to hear your thoughts about now. You once said, or maybe you say this a lot, language is never innocent.
Language is never innocent.
What does that mean?
That means that the way we frame experiences with words is a big intervention. So if we, for instance, diagnose and say this is a personality disorder, this is a borderline personality disorder, it's incredibly big, can be a violent intervention. So, and actually, we have to be aware that violence is an intervention. That language is an intervention. Also, so can we live with a searching language? Searching, maybe finding new words. So when people come to me and they say, yeah, but my son was diagnosed with ADHD, and now I found out I'm always also in ADHD, and that's why I'm so often triggered, and that's why I'm so violent. I will say, okay, so tell me about your ADHD. When and how shall we call it? And I prefer another name. And then I always say this is embodied language. We need embodied language, not abstract language.
So could you slow down and say that again? Is a embodied language contra
abstract.
Abstract, yeah. So what does that mean?
That means John Shutter was one of my big inspirations. And he was always talking about aboutness and the withness. And abstract language brings us into the aboutness. And that's abstract language. We talk about things. We do that a lot. Also in teams, we talk about the family. We talk about what happens there. And the witness is that you really are with people. And we need embodied language there. So if you can ask, okay, what kind of ADHD do you have? Well, when the children are running around and I cannot stand it, I become very, very upset and I need to blah, 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 blah. Okay, and where in your body do you feel that? And then we talk about experience that I also can feel. So as a therapist, I think it's also important to be in my body. and not only analyzing and interpreting, but also in my body feeling, I can imagine this man having a busy day, being at home, children running around, his wife being very critical, that it's too much. So, yeah.
That's that. When you said that, I think that's also what I experienced, the benefit of being in the same room with people. When somebody important is not in the room, the aboutness talk will be challenging, because it will also be a lot of fantasies and imaginations and fears. But if they're in the room, you can actually work with what happens in the room. It's really showing up while we're talking. So what happens to you in your body now, and how does this sound to you?
Yeah. So when we do this work together, very important.
Yeah.
What do you feel, and what's bringing it up? Yeah. Yeah. And that it's happening in the room, and that you're there with them, that you feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feel it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so much I want to ask you, but I have some kind of expectation to talk a little bit about the kids too, and parenting. So would it be possible to shift a little bit into
so
that?
I really wanted to bring in culture, and now we can go. Yeah, and then I want to the children, because it's so important to understand when there's a divorce. It's not the divorce that's a problem for children. We have a lot of research now. Children don't like a divorce. People don't like a divorce. The grandparents do not like a divorce most of the time. And it's unsettling. So nothing is the same. It's not balanced anymore. I have to go to another school, another street. But when the children really matter, and the parents are really talking about how can we manage it in a way that the children can have their life, and they are aware that some things have to stay the same, like school or the grandmother coming every Monday or things like that. It's important for children that some things stay the same. Then after a year, children are balanced again. Children have a lot of resilience, and they can accept the tragedy of the divorce of the parents when they really matter for the parents. So that's that's the big group. And there's a small group where parents are so hurt, they so hurt each other, or maybe also the family is involved, that they keep on fighting each other also after the divorce. And that's where children suffer a lot. But they also suffer in a family where parents do not have a divorce, but fight all the time.
Yeah.
So it's the fight that's the problem. It's not the divorce. That's important to say first, because then, we can talk about after divorce. After the divorce, when they still fight, it becomes more complicated for children, because when it's high conflict, then very often it's two communities, two villages, two clans that split up. It's me and maybe my family, my parents, my sister, maybe my new partner, maybe the old neighbor that is on my side, and it's the other person with no new partner, is alone, but with the family, and maybe I'm still in friendship with your sister, but the two clans split up. And the children are the only ones very often, when it comes to high conflict, that have to bridge this, that have to go from one parent to another. Yeah. And that's this in-between space between the parents can be terrible. Yeah. And I also have to say that a lot of professional helpers in this kind of high conflict divorce make it worse.
Yeah.
They make it worse because they go from a position that you have a divorce as partners, but you cannot split up as parents. You have to be a good team together. And that's where the romantic illusion comes in again. So it's also for professionals that have an awful lot of romantic illusions. We can bring all divorced parents being a good team together, do co-parenting in one way or another. And that's not true. No. We have to accept that sometimes the pain is such a big thing that they cannot work together as a team. No. They have to let go of the other, maybe for a year or longer, very often years later. Yeah, they can meet again, but maybe they need really time to really split up. So, because it's kind of contradictory when you have decided not to live with each other, and there's still something pushing you to collaborate when that's obviously a really hard problem. Now, a lot of people, yeah. As you said, a lot of people make that happen anyhow, even though it's a big challenge, but some don't. So I know if I were a parent that felt like I'm one of those who we're just fighting every time we're supposed to, the child go to the other, we're always having a fight, and there's texting about you lost you didn't remember the clothes to the gymnastics, and you don't care about your child, and even violence can show up in those kind of relationships also. But so I heard you said something about so what works in that kind of situation? If I was sitting and listening to you talking about this, what works? So from listening to you, you have a word that's parallel parenting. Yeah. That seems to me like something you try to do in those situations. Could you talk about that? Yeah, because what I found is that so many parents after divorce are in a way forced also by professionals to be a parental team, and that has the effect that they never have a real divorce. So high conflict divorces are divorces that didn't happen. They're still 24 hours sometimes busy with influencing the other, also by other people, making clear that the other one has a personality disorder or is not safe, or so they're fighting all the time this way. And a lot of professionals get caught in this destructive cycles. Everybody is so parallel parentship is to accept the tragedy of the divorce, to accept that they cannot live together, that they really trigger each other, and how can we help these people to let go of the other? They say, okay, part of my life, I'm here with my children, I make the best of it, and maybe I have a new partner, maybe not, and I search for support here and try to have a good time. And when they go to the other parent, I let go. I do not interfere all the time. How the rules, how the food, how the everything is in the other family, I let go. And if my children are complaining about the other side, we work for this for years now. And a lot of people, children, tell different stories in this fight. They tell mom, oh, I don't like the new partner of father and she's so stupid, and we always have to do this and that, and they don't have time for us, and they see mom, oh, and then they feed that, and then mom wants to protect the children and try to get the professional helpers. They don't want to go to father anymore, and then. But maybe when they are with father and Anna, the new friend of father, they have a good time. Because Anna is actually really doing to have a good time with them. They go out, they do all kinds of things. So children are also confused and tell different stories. Maybe they tell with dad, yeah, mom is so controlling and always want to. And father says, yeah, I know what you mean. Poor children, they would be better off living with me. So children are part of it. And when in parallel parenthood, we try to help and support parents to let go, and also to see how can you support your children if they don't like that and that with that. How can you enlarge the resilience, empower them to say that to that? So not only we protect children too much, and life is not easy. How can we support them to be more resilient, empower them to say that when you're always with her, I want to do this and that with you. When you're always in your computer, I don't like it. How can we support children to deal with conflicts in life instead of saying, okay, stay with me, I will protect you. And that's all about parallel parenthood.
So have you, what do they say? What do the children, when you've been working with this, what's your response? Do you have any response for the children? What's the difference? Does it work?
What works? Is this serious? What works? Yeah, it works. It works in quite a lot of. It doesn't work always, but nothing works always. Nothing. So it works for quite a lot of families, and quite a lot of families think it's a relief to let go of the other, to have parallel parenthood. And that's what we found also in our research, that for children, the space in between the parents is where they suffer. So we also hear from children when the parents let go, they can tell us, it's so much better now. And we ask, what's so much better? They don't fight anymore so much. How is that possible? They don't talk to each other that much. And children can tell us it's so much better. So we have to take it serious. And in the last research was important, we found out it's not only the children that suffer in the in-between space, it's also the parents themselves. They say, actually, I have a good life now. I have a good new partner. I have a good life. Only that ex of mine is such a pain in the ass, such a terrible thing that I still have to deal with that. And then the ex said exactly the same. I'm doing fine. I'm having a good life, except this terrible ex of mine. So it's all of the people and also the grandparents and everybody. So how can we make space in this in-between space, open it up to get the stress down? And then very often parallel parenthood is a good way out. And then I get one more sentence, a lot of questions of professionals, but they have to communicate about this and that and the school. And I think, okay, but sometimes we need to find people from the network that do that for them. So we have cases that really got stuck. Then they both make a choice of one in my network, and we say, make a choice for someone that's acceptable to the other. And then they have to say yes. And these two network members, they can communicate because they want to have the best for the children. And what they decide, the parents have to say, okay, that's then, okay, we go and do that. And that's, sometimes you need that with smaller children.
Wow. Justine, it's like pushing a button. There's always new interesting thing that's coming from you. I look at the clock and I see, well, we'll be talking about an hour now. So I'm thinking we'll slow down and just make some kind of end of this conversation, and the new conversations will come, and who knows, maybe we'll talk a little bit more in the future. But it's so interesting, and as always, I have more questions after the conversation than when I started. So is there something you want to say that didn't fit into this conversation that you have been thinking about during our talk?
Well, maybe that when we were talking about children, it of course also comes to children that do not want to see one parent. It will also be in your environment a big issue where professionals struggle. And there you see actually two routes. I see that in the Netherlands. One is we have to force the children to go to the other parent because children need two parents in their development. It's always better. And this parent is good enough. So we force the children to go there. That's wanting to control it in that way.
Yeah.
And you have a line, give them time, give them a quiet space and let go. And maybe after a year, but don't push them too much. And I think it's both. I don't like it. I don't like to control it. I don't like to let go. So my question always is, how can the adult people build a bridge where the children can walk? And that's, for me, a much better way of finding an entrance that the children can go back and forward between the parents, because I think that's a better place to be also for the future. But we have to build the bridge and not let the children do it.
No, and it's never exactly the same bridge. It's always a new bridge depending on what people are on the other sides, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you don't
always
have a
model. Different bridge. It's always a different bridge.
Yeah. Beautiful, Justine. What a great place to stop with that kind of. I have this big picture of a bridge. Beautiful. Okay, so do you feel, is it okay if we just stop here? And I just want to thank you so much. There's a lot of stuff you've been talking about, so it will take some time to digest it all, but I hope the people who has listened is inspired and curious, even though we've been talking about really difficult times in life. So thank you for being so open and generous, and I love the energy that comes out of you when we talk like this. So thank you for being so inspiring, and maybe we'll talk again, who knows. But for this time, I would like to just say goodbye and thank you so much, Justine, for doing this.
Yeah, and Johnny, I have the same as you, that I think now about so many more things we could talk about, but that's also good to keep it open, not to finalize. I think this is it.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about networks.
No, I know.
Yeah. And that's, but I also like that also in our profession, there's always so much more, and that's good. Keep it open.
Yeah.
That's life.
That's life.
So thank you for the questions, and thank you for having this conversation.
Thank you.